Stories by the Fireplace, Volume 1. This book is a compilation of short folk tales from different communities in Kenya. Stories that were told to the authors by their grandparents around the fireplace in their home villages. Hi, this is Clarity Coach Lucy, and this is Tuesday Talks at 3. Welcome to our episode. Kenya is an amazing country with a rich cultural diversity. Today, we spotlight Stephen Ogweno. He is an optimist. He is an entrepreneur. He is a visionary. He is also a co-author who has used his medium of voice to highlight and celebrate this diversity. As a global health enthusiast, Stephen is well known for his work as an advocate and a trailblazer in the non-communicable diseases field. He wears many hats, clearly, and he is here today to talk about why he co-authored Stories by the Fireplace, the book that we are highlighting this month of August, where we are celebrating our diverse culture in Kenya. This is a book that seeks to inspire and remind us and the generations to come about the very culture that we are referring to, the heritage, and most importantly, the lessons of our country, Kenya. So we asked the question today, how would you like to see our Kenyan diversity celebrated as a people? Please share your thoughts and contributions here on the live chat, and both Stephen and I will sample them. I'm just checking my live feed to see that indeed we are live and that you are able to tune in without any challenges. And let us see. Yes, we are live. We've been live for the last 2 minutes. And great to see you here, Jane Kuvuna. Great to see you here, Kavi. Great to see you here, Nanana. The discussion today is about celebrating our Kenyan culture, or the diversity of our Kenyan culture. And we have a guest today by the name of Stephen Ogweno, who is a co-author of this book, Stories by the Fireplace. And Stephen, we would love you to come onto the screen so that we can welcome you into our session. Karibu sana, Stephen.
Right. Thank you very much. So let's get my handsome face online.
Yes.
All right.
Oh, there you are.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Great to see you, Stephen. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. This has been a call that I've been waiting for, so it's very exciting to be finally having this conversation happen. So thank you very much. And,
Yeah. I'm really grateful also because with this book that we have been highlighting over the month, in line with the season that we are in Kenya today, the season of voting in our leaders, I thought that this was an amazing message to be able to communicate that indeed we are celebrating our diverse culture, which is powerful here in Kenya. So I have a question for you. But before we get to that question about this book, I would like you to tell us a little bit about yourself, Stephen. Let's get to know you.
All right. So as you've introduced me, my name is Ogweno Stephen. I'm really an optimist, an entrepreneur, and a visionary. And then everything else is just titles of what I've been able to do. So as an optimist, I really see the future as positive and that the world will always get better and that there is always better things coming up, even during bad situations or sad situations. As a visionary, I believe in developing for the now, but also for the future. So creating innovations, projects, books, ideas that serve us in the present, but also serve us in the future. Hence the book as one of those components to that. I think we'll talk about that later on. And then that as an entrepreneur is really bringing out my sort of creator skills or my business skills and finding ways of bringing value to the marketplace. And so my life's focus on all of those fronts has really been on health, entrepreneurship, and leadership. So health is the avenue through which my entrepreneurship side shows the most, seeing that I've been able to found and co-found Storyling, for example, which is my oldest surviving company. That's 7 years now, working in 10 countries in the health
Well
space.
done. Well
Lifestyle
done.
health in Rwanda, for example, that's very recent, 2 years now, working to reward people for being healthy. Leadership, I've sort of run with the Legacy Leadership Africa, which is sort of our leadership front, where we train young leaders, we empower them, and we really focus on creating legacies right from the young age. And then as a visionary is really through the books and the various leadership positions that I hold in both sort of local and global organizations, where we're able to present thought leadership, present research, also be able to share my ideas, insights, and wisdom that I've been able to gather over the years that I've lived. And that should be a good highlight of myself and what I do.
Wow. How profound and how impactful. I mean, you've really articulated it so well. And what I'm hearing, it is around three main pillars, and that is your optimism, your visionary, and your entrepreneurial side that you are bringing out. And I'm absolutely loving the words that you're using to describe yourself, because in these times, we need to be looking at positivity and looking at possible things that could be happening, as opposed to concentrating on the impossible. So positive outcomes are important, Stephen. And the fact that you were there and you've got a niche, which is the youth, and this is the message that you would be sending out. For me, it just lands so well and so authentically that you are a visionary and yours is about creating innovation. And what you have said that really rings true for me, or important, is that you're looking at the present and the future. What can you do today to impact that future? And you're making that part of your narrative, as opposed to hanging on in the past. In fact, one of my theologies is that the only reason I'm looking at the past is for the lessons learned that I can apply in the here and now and in my future. And it's great to hear somebody else being able to support that thought process. And last but not least, that you are an entrepreneur, your business skills, you're looking at legacy. I'm sure another word that I could add in there that would add even more value is succession planning. Who takes over from us, the next generation? Wow, wow, wow. Optimism, visionary, and entrepreneur. This is just amazing. I know that you have founded many companies, and you mentioned two of them, and that you have 4 successful ones. You've written 6 books with 2 global bestsellers, and you've trained and mentored just over 35,000 young leaders. I will say that number again. 35,000 young leaders. We are so honored to have you here with us. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us. So my question that I wanted to ask is, why did you write, or why did you co-author this book?
So if you hear the wind and if it's disturbing, it's because I'm outside and I might change the location if it's too loud. But and you let me know if it is loud, and then I just sort of shift.
I will, but right now we are loving the fact that you're out in nature.
All right. So why did I write the book, and why was this a very sort of important part of my action that I really needed to commit time to? So I wrote the book because of 3 major reasons, really. And the first one for me, when I was approached by Joy, who's a very good friend of mine, to contribute a few chapters in the book, contributing those stories, it was really an honor, because for the longest time I've also been planning on how I could be able to document part of those early stories that were told, in a bid to preserve them for the future, in a bid to ensure that moving forward we have our stories documented, because as the trend goes, we can see even now that a lot of us are living in cities, a lot of us are not telling these stories, a lot of us don't even know these stories anymore.
Yes.
So how do we document them so that the future have an opportunity to listen to what you are told? So that was really important for me. And so the element of preserving culture and ensuring that the stories live on was very
Yeah.
important to me, and
Yeah.
really drove me to then make a contribution in writing the book. But also the other thing that I see that really ensured that the book continued to, had to be written, and that the chapters that I contributed had to be written, is the question of values. And right now, especially among young people, values are beginning to be questionable, and we are
Yeah.
sort of losing that moral fabric that held us together, which is values. And so writing this book for me was a way to communicate the values that we could be able to pass on to uh, us as a generation now, but also to the other younger generations to follow: values of
Yeah.
honesty, values of humility,
Yeah.
values of patience, for example, values of self-discipline, of loyalty. So that in itself, I thought, was something that needed to be repeated. And the way we learned these values was through these stories. And so the best way to pass them forward is also then through stories, which is
Yeah.
why book was a
Yeah.
very important part to write. And then finally is really to showcase diversity. And that, I think, was also a very huge driving point for me, because it is not just about the Luo stories that I was able to contribute into the story. It was also about
Okay.
the Kikuyu stories, the Kisi
Yeah.
stories, and all the other sort of major stories that contributed into the chapter, seeing that when you read through them, you can see common threads of values that are shared across. And then you can also see different ways and different stories in how those are communicated. And so that diversity in itself, the beauty of that, and sort of the lessons that could be learned from those unique perspectives brought about in one book, looked very attractive to me. And so when I was given the opportunity to contribute, I in fact encouraged others to come on board and say, hey, we have this thing that we're just ready to write, and then can you come in and let us just do it? And we did it, and I think it's something great.
Wow. Wow. I'm just going to take a moment there to just internalize what you have said, because that is powerful, Stephen. Many of us like to be part, or prefer to be part of, the challenge, the problem, the issue. What I'm hearing from you, Stephen, is you wanted to be part of the solution, and you stepped right into it. And how did you step right into it? You just took the bull literally by its horns, and you contributed to something that seemed to be dying. Because as you have said, most of us are living in cities now. It's a modernization that is happening naturally. It's a natural progression. And as a result, the experience of the fireplace and the setting where our grandparents are in the village, and therefore in the evening, when everything winds down, we're able to sit and look back at the day and share the richness of our culture. That particular situation is something that seems to be disappearing. And you actually decided to take on this opportunity and be part of the solution, and in your own words, to preserve and promote our culture. And I want to honor you for that you are looking at, with your own contribution, passing values to the new generation through these stories. And you've also said it was not only in the Luo stories that you contributed, but even in the Abagusi and in the Kikuyu stories. And this is just amazing, because you're reminding us that we are Kenyans first. That is who we are. We show up as Kenyans, and then we start to answer the question, which culture, which tribe, what is your background? But if I was to go across to the next country, I identify myself as a Kenyan first. Thank you for showing the beauty of our diversity. And I'm just loving the fact that you mentioned that there are common threads throughout these stories. So definitely our grandparents, they had something going for them. They knew how to manage a community, and this is how they were passing it on to the rest of us. And today, because this scenario is not a common one, I mean, it still exists, but I'm a grandmother and I live in the city. I live on the 6th floor. I don't have a fireplace where I can sit in the evening and share with my grandchildren or my grandchild, as is the case. But now I have a book. I have a book that I can be able to read. And I just want to read the introduction of your part, which is just amazing. And it reminded me so many things. And I encourage people to buy this book. And you say the Luo, also called Joluo or Jonagi, Onagi, singular, Jaluo, Jaonagi or Joramogi, Nyikwaramogi, meaning Ramogi's heirs. I never knew any of this. If you asked me, I would have said it was Jaluo. And maybe Joramogi, although I thought that was somebody's name. But actually it just means Ramogi's heirs. So you say the Luo are an ethnic group in Western Kenya, northern Uganda, and in the Mara region in northern Tanzania. I never knew that. They are part of a larger group of linguistic Luo people who inhabit an area ranging from South Sudan, southwestern Ethiopia, northern and eastern Uganda, southwestern Kenya, and northeastern Tanzania. Claiming to be the Black Jews of Africa, literature has provided linguistic similarities to assert that the Luo people have a link to the Hebrews. The link has been claimed to be during the slavery of the Israelites in Egypt. Fun fact, never knew that. The Luo are the 4th largest ethnic group in Kenya. They are mostly fishermen. They migrated from Bahr el Ghazal, a sub-tributary of River Nile, and first settled in Pukungu Pakwach in Uganda, and later dispersed to Kisumu in Kenya and Tanzania near Lake Victoria. Their leader was called Ruoth, meaning chief. Their religion these days are Christianity, African traditional religion, and some are Muslim. Their god was called Nyasai, who used to stay at Ramogi Hills. Known as Ramogi's descendants, the Luo community is in particularly known for their musical skills and instruments. Notable Luos include the former Prime Minister of Kenya, Raila Odinga, the former President of the United States of America, Barack Obama, Oscar Award-winning artist Lupita Nyong'o, and the environmentalist scientist and Nobel Prize winner, Professor Sam Odingo. And that's an introduction that you have in your book. Great fun facts here, something we can fall back on and even have over a dinner conversation. And this is powerful. And if it has impacted me, this modern grandma, you can imagine how much more it is impacting other people. So speaking about values, Stephen, what values do you touch on in your book?
All right. Yes. So, well, as you're reading the introduction, I was sort of reliving that again because
yes,
when I was doing my research to get that short brief, I sort of went into reading other books and I was like, oh, wow. So I didn't even know this myself until I sort of started to go into the details. So it was very exciting to hear you read that
wow,
again and fun facts and the connections
wow,
and whatnot. But yeah, going into the values, what values have I talked about in the book? So from story to story, there are key values that I have been able to share as the stories are developed. But one of the values that I saw as a riding thread through almost all of the 5 was the value of honesty, that you need to tell the truth and then you need to tell it as it is. That is a value that I saw when I was writing the book that went across all the stories from the Luo community. And then interestingly, as I started to read the Abagusi particularly, and then the others was like, huh, So honesty was a big thing back then, despite these people not interacting as much. But then when I sort of started to go deeper into the values that showed up in the stories, one sort of value category was pride versus humility, and there was always a very interesting sort of dance in the stories when it comes to pride and humility. And you can see that, for example, in the story of Luanda Magere, in the story of Simbi Nyaima, for example, and you see how pride dances with humility, where they show you the pride side of things and what it could be able to accomplish, and then what humility could be able to accomplish. And they show you that through either successes of humility or failures of pride, which I thought was a very interesting dance that, you know, showcased in those stories. And then there was the issue of strategy and leadership. So most of the time when you talk about values and you talk about things that these stories share with us, most of the people just end up at the, you know, pride versus humility, which is the obvious one, which is the ones that show up almost instantly. But when you go deeper into, for example, Londo Magere and Simi Nyaiwa, which are sort of used as centerpieces for you know, examples today, is there's a very interesting dance as well in terms of strategy and leadership, that leaders are people who must have strategy as a way in which they implement, and that strategy comes before you implement the project. And if you don't use, you know, the correct strategy, and then the issue of pride comes in, automatically it's obvious in all of the 5 stories that I shared that you lose. And that if you're able to listen in and develop a strategy and consult with people, that you'll almost always win. And that is, you know, part of the stories that were there. Another part of the sort of values that showcased in these stories is honesty versus loyalty. And who are you honest to? Are you the kind of people who give up your kinsmen or communities? Do you sell their secrets out? And if you sold their secrets out, like in the case of Luanda Magere, for example, then what does that lead to? You know, you get killed in the end, or, you know, your secret ends up having a big impact in the community. And so people die because you're not honest and you're not loyal to your community or your people, you know, and loyal to the values that you proclaim. So looking at back then, it was about the people, but right now it's more about what you stand for. So when you look at loyalty, for example, is what are you loyal to? What are the values that are sort of ingrained in you that you are loyal to? That for me, I can't, you know, for example, accept a bribe because my values state that I need to be loyal to this. You know, such elements then begin to show up in some of those stories. And then there's also a very interesting one between obedience and wisdom. And there's a story there that I shared, the very last one, where this shows up very well, that there is 2 kinds of obedience. There is sort of the blind obedience, obeying without knowing, without having the facts. And then there is the wisdom to know, and then the wisdom to decide, should I listen to this or should I not listen to this? Am I blindly obedient to, say, feelings of love or connection, or am I taking the wisdom to then be obedient to, you know, the facts and the people? And so those interesting dances in terms of values and contrasting values was a very interesting way of sort of communicating them through the stories that are in the book.
Pride versus humility, strategy and leadership, honesty and loyalty, obedience and wisdom. Oh, these are definitely things that are so relevant today, and things that we need to be standing up for. And just Stephen, the way you were saying that today it's about who am I and what do I stand for? These are pillars that our ancestors already had and were using, and were passing it on from generation to generation. And the power of that story never changed, because the values are the ones that drove this narrative. So being able to build it up for the next generation with these examples, I find it very powerful. And I then question myself, what do I do in my own home, is this the pillar that I am building my home from or with, for want of a better term? Because a community, the social gathering or the social framework or the social part of our livelihood starts from the family unit, whatever that family unit looks like. It's where you come from. And if we're able to get that right, then by the time we have leadership and people running whatever corporation, organization, school, institution, country, world, then we can be sure that the foundation was strong. Thank you so much for sharing that. But then the question begs, how do we keep these values sustainable? Knowing them is one thing, Stephen. How do we keep them sustainable?
Yeah, so that's a very beautiful question, and I sort of love the question of sustainability, because as a person, really, it's sort of part of my visionary side of things is how are we able to create them for today, but also ensure that even in the future they exist. And so the old guys back then did it so beautifully, and they did it so timelessly through repetition, which is the way in which anything really sticks. And especially for adults, then the only way we learn and the only way we develop habits, because all of these values ultimately are habits, is through repetition. And so for them, and even for us now, is the question of embedding these stories and these practices in our daily lives, in how we live, how we act, how we talk. Having those as part of that then ensures that we are able to have these values sustainably in us, but also even pass them on. Because if I'm able to do this on the daily, I can be able to pass it on to my friend, who can be able to pass it on to my friend. And so that is how they did it back then. And even today, that is the advice that still goes around, that if you want to learn something, and then if you want to make it sustainable over the long term, you have to do it repeatedly as part of your habits. So that is the first way. And then the second way that I found this is then through communication. And then how do we communicate? Because you find that if we sit in a class and then you say, hey, what is honesty? This is honesty. What is humility? This is this. Then it is almost definite that 90% of that information, by the end of the day, you shall have forgotten it. But if it is weaved in a story, if it is weaved in a narrative that you can be able to remember over time, that has interest, that drives creativity, then you are able to remember it. And the old guys knew it back then, that that is the way that they'll be able to pass on these values. And even today, that is the best way to communicate, is through stories and through sharing them, making them fun, and repeating those stories. So then the medium of communication that is stories became a way, or becomes a way even today, for us to ensure that we are continuously and sustainably implementing and talking about these values. And then I think the last part really is in how we live as a people. Back then, our parents really lived these stories. When they were talking about honesty, and they were talking about Leonardo Maguire, for example, sharing his secrets and that leading to his demise, they didn't share the secrets that they had outside. You'd see family conflict, family conversation didn't move outside of the house. They wouldn't be going outside gossiping about this and sharing. And so if you saw them do that, then in yourself, you'd be like, if my mom is doing this, if my dad is doing this, then that is what is supposed to be done. When it came to for example, hard work, because values of hard work are shared throughout all of these stories. You'd see our parents that wake up every morning very early on a routine, go to work, go to the farm, clean their house, pay for our education, ensure that the family is provided for. And if you saw as a child that this is what being a parent is, or what being a hardworking person is, and then you see the results from the hard work. They've gone to the farm, they've tilled it, they've farmed it, and then it takes 3 to 6 months, and then they harvest now and they have money, and then people are celebrating, and you see that whole cycle, then it becomes a practice. It sort of puts a stamp to you as a child or as a person who's observing, that this is how it's done. It's you live the practice. I tell you the story and then I live it, and then for you, you'll be able to learn it through the life that I've been able to curate for myself. So I find that those are the ways in which you're then able to sustainably keep these values moving forward.
Wow, Stephen, thank you so much for reminding us that we are defined by our values. By the time you are describing yourself, that we need to hear these values being put forth as who you are. And we need to be role models, because this is the responsibility that comes with leadership, so that when people are looking up to us, the things that we are doing, they are able to see it works. It works to the benefit of the community, and that they can take it through. The big thing here is accountability. Are we accountable for what it is that we say, that we hold? And therefore, values are important for us. I love the repetition of what we need to have. I'm just going to read a few comments here. And let's see. Salia, very great to see you here. Votagwa, good to see you. It's also good to see you, Liza Yani. Hello, Stephen from Jane Kuvuna. I like your introduction. You have diverse knowledge. Stephen, that one is a shout out to you. Jane says, wow, that is a great number. So I think she's referring to the 35,000 young leaders. Javier says, my goodness, Stephen, you are one big box of opportunities. Yes, Sally, indeed he is. He's got so much going for him. And then there's another comment here. I have learned a lot from the introduction of the Luos. There you go, Jane. There's so much to learn. And last week we were looking at the introduction of the Agikuyu, and then the introduction of the Abagusi the week before. This book is just gems after gems after gems. You must get yourself a copy. And then we see here, yes, our guest from the week before last of the Abagusi. You say that your name is Ambassador Louis Momanyi, Karibu Louis, and you say Stephen Ogwenwo, always inspiring wisdom. I agree with him that honesty and humility is one of the key values, especially for the younger generation. Yes, we need to impart this, but Louis, we need to be the role models. We need to be the ones who are showing them it can be done and how it can be done. And then repetition, true, and storytelling medium, fantastic. Liza Yani says, Stephen, very inspiring, hard work, learned from my parents, keeps me going. And this is so true. Thank you so much. Remember that the question today is, how would you like to see our Kenyan diversity celebrated as a people? How would you like to see it? I definitely want to see more of storytelling because it's powerful. And I just want to share with you one story from this book that was an amazing bonding session between my grandson and I, and my grandson, I beg your pardon, and I. And it is the story of Luanda Magere, the Luo legendary warrior. And Stephen has an amazing build up to this story. I mean, he just doesn't jump into the story and say, this is the story of Luanda Magere. He actually builds up the scene, and he talks about the evening and how the duties had been done during the day and how now we are winding down after a long day, how the grandparents would call them, the children would gather around, and there would be some singing and dancing and the celebrations. He even refers to a train that was passing. So I can imagine that. He builds it up so well. And he says that after supper is when the story is told and it is narrated. And he said, just before he started the story, he says, it was a perfect night, befitting the perfect story of the legend, Luanda Magere. You even feel like your voice needs to be reduced and, an octave lower because you're about to be in the presence of Luanda Magere. What I loved about the story from the introduction, I get information that I was not aware of before because I did literature in school and I know the story of Luanda Magere, but I do not remember that Luanda meant rock, and Magere was either the one that builds or the fierce one. But that besides the point, it just added to the value of this story. And when we went through the story and I was reminded about it, And I was reminded of the lessons. Stephen does not leave us hanging. When he goes into lessons, and yes, there are lessons in his 5 stories, he says, one cousin with whom we always seemed to fight for attention quickly raised her hand and said, we should never fight. And all this is in response to his grandfather saying, what do we learn from this story? So she says, we should never fight. And there was a slight laughter from everyone. In spite of this, we all got a chance to mention our own lessons, albeit shallow, that we had garnered from the story. My grandparents then summarized the important lessons that they wanted us to get. And now we got the important lessons, but he actually honors the young children in the story. A young child will always have their own version. Then it is our duty, responsibility as adults to pick out the important lessons. I mean, my grandson, he came out straight and said, you know what, Grandma, you should never trust women. Oh, we cracked up. I mean, that is what he was taking away. He took that away. This little girl here took away that they should never fight. But the main lessons were to listen to your parents and elders, that is now obedience. And then the second one was that pride comes before a fall. You need to buy this book. Stephen, what do you hope to achieve with this book, and how has it improved your community?
All right. So again, this is warning. It's dark outside, but I'm still outside.
Yes.
The minute it begins to fall, camera will be off. I'll be running inside. But yes, before it falls, let's do the what you want to share. So I think one of the things is, and again, you'll see that as a common thread through this conversation, is at a high level, really bringing out the concept of diversity, why we are here, and how we connect with each other, and why that is important. So diversity in itself becomes an overriding sort of lesson for me. And this is the point where the camera goes off and I change location. But I'll continue.
Please continue. We can hear you loud and clear. Continue.
Yeah. So diversity becomes a very key element in terms of the stories and the lessons that I hope to share moving forward through the book. And then the next part of this then becomes the importance of really sharing, and the importance of sharing stories with people, but also the community that it creates. Because again, without community, we find that there is no coexistence. So we have to sort of exist together, and communities are created through stories and through sharing of experiences, which is another way in which you can be able to pass on the information. But then also, as I've been shared over and over through our conversation today, is a question of values. What is your values? What values are you picking up? Why are they important? Why should you pick them up? I think that's a conversation that I'm really rooting for when I'm writing this book. And even as you read the book, that is an overriding lesson that in all of my stories, I try to share the values side of things and the lesson side of things. That what lessons can we share or can we gather from the story, and then what values can you pick up and practice as an individual? So values is again a very important component. And then the question again of the stories themselves and preserving them. And social media and TikTok and modernization, it changes. And if it is not documented in books, the way the ones who went before us documented theirs in books, then still lost because we weren't able to document them. And you see our counterparts in Europe and in other countries, because they're able to document them, they've been able to keep their stories. And so this is a way to ensure that our stories live on, and that our legacies or the legacies of our grandparents or great-grandparents also lives on through the stories that they share. And then finally, I think it's also an issue of, of fulfillment, and ensuring that as a person, that I've been able to be a part of contributing to that history, contributing to that, in 50, 100 years later, when someone will be reading the book, you'll be like, huh, some people sat down and thought that we needed to hear these stories again, and I'll be one of those people. So that sense of fulfillment and looking into the future and seeing that these will continue to live on, I think it's an important part of the stories and why they had to be there.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing how it is improving your community and also the achievements that you're looking for. And you bring in values again. Clearly, it's about passing on these values and preserving the African story with the power of diversity, because you talk about the community and how it needs to commune. And there's so much that we can learn from one another, but also so much that we can see we are just alike. There's so little that divides us. We are actually alike. It's just that geographically we belong to different places. But I want to talk about the documentation just for a few seconds there. And I want to reinforce what you're saying, that documentation is important. Each and every one of us listening to this session today has a story to tell. But maybe, and I'm speaking to you, the audience, maybe it has not landed for you yet how powerful that story is and how you need to tell that story because somebody is waiting to hear it, and how that story will outlive you, just as Stephen is saying, and that it has a connotation of legacy, a legacy that you have left. And my morbid example of this afternoon is your eulogy. When your eulogy is being read at your funeral, what story do you want to be told? Well, if you have documented a story at this point, then you're leaving your family in a peaceful state of mind where they don't have to scrap through stories, piecing things together. You've told them who you are and what you stand for. Stephen keeps on harping on about values. So do you want to write a book? Do you want to be able to record yourself on a podcast? Do you want to do what I'm doing and having a platform like this to celebrate other people and bring on diversity? I leave that for you to think about, but there's power in diversity. And especially if you're going to be talking about values, talking about fulfillment, Stephen, how has this book impacted your life? You've told us about fulfillment. How else?
Yeah, the book has impacted my life in many ways. So maybe I'll sort of talk about my life in connection with others, then sort of my life as a person.
Yeah.
So in terms of my life in connection with others, I think the immediate thing that the book did once I had the hard copies and I started to sort of bring them around, sharing with my family that, hey, look at what we have here. There was sort of an excitement. There was a round of excitement that, hey, finally we have something that represents us and our tribe and our culture instead of a mix of other cultures. So sort of that excitement and the stories that came after that, I remember I read that story of William Magere, the way it was written, with a group of friends of mine on a seat, and we're like, let's sort of imitate a fireplace and let's like gather around and see it and read it. And sort of my younger brothers were there and we sort of read this story. And you could tell that there was some energy there. There was some excitement. There were like, we sort of enjoyed that session. And so I think that in itself, that excitement, that energy that we're now working in connection with others that the book brought was one way that it has really impacted my life. And then, of course, there has been a lot of interest now. A lot of the people I've worked with are in towns and they've sort of either grown there or lived there. They don't know about their stories, they don't know about cultures. And so when they begin to ask questions,
yeah. Have we lost you, Stephen? It seems like Stephen has frozen right there. Stephen, are you able to hear us?
All right, let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
I think we got lost right there, Stephen. Please go ahead.
Sorry. All right, yeah, so it's the rain doing interrupting the
We are here, Stephen. Yeah. Talk to us.
Yeah, so in terms of other ways in which the book has sort of impacted my life is in terms of ensuring that even myself and now the people around me are better able to understand our culture better and our stories better, but also access to new audiences, because the truth is now I'm getting interest from people who are not even of African origin and they want to read stories. And it's very interesting that on the day of the launch, we had people from Hollywood who are like, wow, could we produce the stories as well? So access to like those audiences and new people wanting to learn about the culture has been an interesting thing. In fact, 2 days ago, I just came from visiting my grandmother, and I sort of handed her the book and told her that this is your stories are in here, and I've sort of been able to document nicely. And it was sort of a very warm experience. She was like, "Oh wow, I'm an author now." That experience, as part of the impact, and now the people in the village will now start reading again and having pride and seeing themselves in these stories, I think has been a great way as well. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing that you've actually put a smile on your grandmother's face, and now she believes that she's a source, a powerful source of these stories. In fact, what I see as a possibility and a positive, because I am choosing to be an optimist like you, is that once your mother now knows that this space does exist, because there are not that many children around her fireplace anymore, and when the villagers realize this is something that they can be part of, we will have more stories coming out, and you will have a busy time receiving these calls and stories, and I'm sure it's going to be a great place for you, for your creativity, because you are a visionary. So thank you so much for that. What call to action do you have for fellow Kenyans, and why?
All right, so that would be three. And my first call to action again is really emphasizing the importance of diversity and knowing that diversity is power. It's in our differences that our strength is found. If everybody was the same, and if everybody was doing the exact same thing, the exact same stories, life on earth would be very boring and our experience would be very shallow. It's because we are different, it's because we are diverse, it's because we have different experiences that we are able to brew together a very lively place to build, to have adventures in, and to interact. And it's sort of to remind us as a people, as a nation, that it's in that diversity, it's in that difference, it's in that unique nature that we have that our strength comes from, and that we need to hold that diversity strongly and guard it very courageously. So that is one of the main lessons that I'm sort of pushing out today, and also through the book. That and you can see even for yourself when you begin to read the book and you read the different stories, is that, oh wow, all of this is us. All of this is what Kenya and Kenyan culture is about. So that in
Exactly.
itself, that strength of diversity, that is, one of the key lessons that I'm really pushing out and that I hope the people really get to understand. And then the other thing is that our values define us. Who we are is what our values are. And if you want to know who we are as a people, as a country, we are a strong people because we have diversity values of hard work. We are people of intelligence because we have values of strategy. We are people of discipline. We are people of beauty. We are people who embrace, culture. And now at a personal level, as people who are watching, as individuals, is to understand that those values that we hold to ourselves is what define us, not what we do. What we do is just, what we do, but who we are is our values. And so we need to push it out there that that's who we are, our values. And then I guess the last lesson then that I'm also really pushing out is for people to understand that there is a lot that unites us, despite the fact that we are very unique and diverse, and that a lot of focus should also be on that we are having a lot of common traits, common characteristics, common threads that run across. There goes the thunder.
Oh, we hear it.
That.
Okay.
Yes, there goes the thunder to confirm that we are really, united because of a lot of the values that we share. And we might present them in different ways. We might share them through different stories. But at the end of the day, we are really sharing a common thread of things: hard work, humility, excellence, discipline. That's who we are. And so we need to hold on closely to what unites us, which is a lot of these values shared across.
Yeah, very powerful. And that's a message that we should all take home. There's a lot that unites us and little that separates us. Values, again, are coming across from Stephen there. Diversity is coming across. And Stephen, I am going to steal, not I'm going to, I have stolen a quote from you, which goes, it is our differences that our strength, it is in our differences that our strength is found. I have Friday thoughts every Friday on my Instagram and on my WhatsApp stories. And that I am stealing for this Friday because I find that powerful and so articulately well put. And I believe as Kenyans, we need to hear this message today so that we stay focused on being Kenyans as we celebrate our diversity. Well, Stephen, where can we find this book? Where can we find you? How do we contact you?
Yeah, so the book first. So the book is available on Amazon, and I believe very soon it will also be available on bookstores. A lot of the authors are also producing hard copies, so you can also be able to reach them like directly. So that is one place you can find the book. The other place you can find the book and myself is on my website, which is www.ogwenostephen.com. On the website, when you click on my publications page, where I sort of document all of my publications, you'll find this book there and a direct link to where you can buy it from Amazon. And also it's on my website where you'll find all of my social media platforms, because I have several. I run 2 podcasts. I run, all of the social media accounts. I have a YouTube page, an Instagram page. So on the website, it documents all of those on the media tab. And so when you visit www.ogwenostephen.com, you should be able to access all of the work that I do, and hopefully all of the other resources that I have on the website that might be of interest to the listeners. So yes.
Thank you for that. So what next for you as an author, Stephen?
A few things. So as it concerns this book, I guess the story continues, and we've barely scratched the surface with what we can do with this book. We haven't really got out there yet, and plans are underway between me and the other authors to, find ways of getting this to schools, to getting this to
Yes.
communities, holding conferences and events where we can actually just be talking about diversity and storytelling and our African cultures. So those are underway as it concerns this book in particular and sort of plans for this book. And so this I guess is like introduction to what is yet to come in as far as the book is concerned. But in terms of me as a person and looking at my author side of things, my latest book just came out. It's a book called Practical Skills for Entrepreneurial Success, where I document my journey with entrepreneurship and my first 25 years in life and the lessons I've been able to gather there in a bid to offer the readers a step-by-step approach to start a business and run it successfully. So that book is out, and now we're just beginning to get the audiobooks, the soft copies, and then a series of events will be out as concerns the book. So that is where I'll be focusing on as well. And yeah, that's a bit of my next steps.
Fantastic. I'm just updating here on the thread. I've put in your website. So anybody willing, wanting to get in touch with Stephen, please do so. I've also just put in just authored Practical Skills. And what about Practical Skills? Is it an entrepreneurship book? What is it about?
Yeah, so Practical Skills is sort of my autobiography, but also my way of educating people on entrepreneurship, especially entrepreneurship in Africa. So entrepreneurship is very different in that most of the time we have Western experience in entrepreneurship. We have the Mark Zuckerberg and the Steve Jobs to look up to. But what I do with Practical Skills is show this, how we're able to develop and become successful from an African perspective with our challenges and how and the tips and the tricks that you can be able to use from Africa as an African to be successful business owner or entrepreneur in Africa. And so I document my journey from where I started and how I've been able to go through the challenges, and then how I was able to sustain the businesses. I started like 13 businesses and I've had like 6 of them fail terribly at different stages. So sharing the lessons from that as well, and then eventually sharing laws, because there is fundamental laws to nature that guide business and entrepreneurship. So it's a very interesting book in that I give my sort of 10 commandments from my perspective when it comes to life and business. And one of my interesting ones is the law of use, which states that whatever you don't use, you lose. So if you don't use the inspiration from this talk today, to go and start your own book, to go and start your own podcast, then you lose it, and then you sort of go back into the ordinary. So I'll sort of leave it at that, and maybe we'll talk about that next time.
Okay, well, I've just managed to capture a few things there. Just authored Practical Skills, an autobiography, and Stephen's take and experience on entrepreneurship, how to develop and become successful as an African entrepreneur. Now you must leave us with 3 takeaways. If you can just mention them, 1, 2, 3. We are now at the end of our session. Stephen, what are you leaving us with?
So top 3 takeaways. 1, diversity is power, and we need to hold on to that. Our values define us. So we are who our values are. And then finally, if I've been able to do it as an author, if I've been able to do it as an entrepreneur, you can do it too. You can write about your community, about yourself, about your life experiences, because we want to read your story.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stephen, for providing a platform to celebrate our Kenyan diversity and for reminding us that we are Kenyans first. We celebrate you with your favorite quote from Maya Angelou. Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. Asante sana, Stephen. Thank you for coming on to our Tuesday Talks at 3 today. We thank you.
Yeah, Thank you very much for having me as well. And yeah, it's a wrap, eh?
It's a wrap. Karibu sana. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, LMC Consultancy, for the recording, and share your feedback with us on Instagram and Facebook. We have launched our online courses, guys. So visit our website, www.lmcconsultancy.com, and sign up for personal development and customer service. Right now, we're running 2 courses. We want you to get there. Give us feedback how these courses are impacting your life positively. My book title is Awakening Self, as you can see right here behind me, and it is available on my social media channels and on Amazon. You want to get the Kindle version on Amazon so you can read it off your phone on the Kindle app. And check out our social media platforms for our August Tuesday Talks at 3 lineup. We only have 1 more Tuesday to go. We have another author coming up as we celebrate Kenya's diversity. Guys, let us help build one another. Until then, be kind to yourselves. Bye-bye now.